Okay, so you were talking about wholeness. Okay, so I know something like depression is a big taboo in our community. Now, how do you appeal to somebody that is trying to confide in you about their depression, and they're kind of coming from a place where, well, if you're feeling that kind of lack of wholeness, it must be something in your being.
Absolutely. I think you bring up, and that's actually why I wanted to talk about this idea of healing and wholeness and hope, because there can be a theological intervention around hope and discussion, but also there is a need for understanding that the journey of healing has multiple interventions that are necessary. So if you look at the story of Maryam, there was a bodily need for being able to access food and water. So I think one of the things our community has to be able to do is begin to talk about what are the real needs. If someone is experiencing depression, the intervention of placing blame on them for that issue is very problematic. And the need for us to begin to say that there are many interventions, particularly we know that there are hadith and examples of people taking medicine, that medicine was part of the reality, and the permission was given to take medicine. So I think what I'm pointing out here is that I think we have to be very careful about telling someone that if you're dealing with a mental health issue, the intervention should be someone who has the knowledge about that particular mental health issue. If you're not trained in that area, you can make the situation much worse. So if someone's coming to me and asking me about depression, and I'm trained as, I'm a professor who teaches interreligious education, I have to take aside my ego, take aside my perspective, and say part of the healing process is, as Maryam did, is asking for the right person to help you. So I think we have to do a better job of accessing the right and appropriate intervention for a particular person's problem. The other thing is, we also have to talk about the fact that sometimes religion and religious people have been responsible for trauma. A lot of us are walking around with trauma that has been inflicted by those that are cloaked in the form of religion. So how do we begin to have a conversation about healing in a way that talks about the expertise that is out there and allows us to train Muslims in areas that we need more expertise, but also talk about the reality that sometimes humans damage religion in a way that damages other humans. And I think that's a really sophisticated conversation, and one that I think is so deep in our community. And I have to say again, it's not just multiple communities are dealing with this exact issue. So I wanted to point that out too. We have to begin to have an honest conversation. And to get to your point, if someone, I'll give you an example. I think we've had some of the speeches here. If someone says, such and such happened to me, and this person had religious authority, does a community have a system in which that religious authority is held accountable? Or do they use religion to protect themselves from being accountable for what they did? So we have to be very careful about how religion is being used against someone if they are feeling a vulnerability or they need to have a mental health issue addressed. We also have to be careful about when there are abuses in the community, how we engage and deal with that. The last thing is, I think, as the Women's Mosque is talking about, is thinking about mental health and wholeness of the whole community and doing more education in that area. We have to be able to recognize signs that are emerging in our community, and we have some wonderful resources in our community here and in the Women's Mosque around mental health issues. So I think all of those are really, really important, because the most damaging thing you can do to someone's relationship with God is to use that relationship with God to damage them. Does anyone else want to?
That was beautiful. Thank you.
I don't know who's doing the moderation.
Yeah. Is there someone else? Well, we don't have a hand mic. Can I have one? Yes. Talk about it. Brother Syed, don't be shy now, brothers. I will put the invisible mic on
So,
something.
I have a general question.
You do, go ahead with it.
So with the
Invisible mic.
with such a rich, thank you very much. It was wonderful what you relayed to us. Very grateful for that. But so with such a rich story, I don't know what the word is, but we have such in Islam, we have such rich lessons to glean from. And so where did we go wrong? I mean, we had so many great scholars, and we still have some great scholars, and so somewhere down the road there was this kind of disconnect. Could you identify?
So the question is, when did we go wrong? For some reason that reminds me of Monty Python, like sketch, like where did civilization go wrong? I mean, I think I can't really speak. I'm not a historian, so but I would say that I would answer it with a couple of points. One of them is the way that we do teach history is very problematic. So the way that we teach American history or Islamic history is by the battles, right? I can tell you, in a lot of the education that I had growing up, how many people were on one side in Uhud, what happened at the Battle of Khandaq, how many people were in Badr, and what was the result. You know what I'm saying? Like, but we teach American history as well, the same way. Part of the way that we teach, what I'm getting to, the point that I wanted to get to is not, I can't speak when we went wrong, but I think there are also times when things went right. And if the way that we have a relationship with our history and our tradition is to often only look at the points in which violence happened, or a perspective that didn't include the role that women had in forming. You know, we saw the disappearance of acknowledgement of female scholars and scholarship. There's a major project now with, I don't remember how many volumes, retrieving the contributions of women. The amnesia that we're able to produce in the interpretation of our history allows for oppression in current times.
Yes.
This view of a purity of history in which women weren't at the table. So there's a beautiful set of ahadith, Tahrir al-Mara fi Asr al-Hijri, which records any time a woman was around the Prophet. Not just said anything, but the fact that women were in the space around the Prophet. I've started doing this in looking at hadith around interfaith relations. Anytime there was a person who wasn't a Muslim, not even when the Prophet rendered a decision, but when we look at his example and we begin to see the space around him and the people around him, I would say that I don't know when things went wrong, but there were a lot of incredible lessons that are discernible. What I think is very wrong in our education around our own tradition is to use incredible and general abstractions. How many things like this? Islam is a religion of peace. Islam is beautiful. Islam, at the time of Prophet Muhammad, women were much freer than they ever have been. So we have these grand abstractions. And how do I tell my 7-year-old, well, how do you actually manifest those things? And what happens, and I want to end with this, is that there's this abstraction that's so general. And this reality, as you're saying, that people are seeing every day. And the best interpreters of character are children. They see this disconnect, and as they grow, they begin to see that this is an impossibility. And so I would say that what we need to do is begin to think about how do we teach the tradition in a way that is self-critical and honest and open, but specific to how we manifest it in an everyday existence.